Story 1. I taught middle school for 20 years. There are no names left. Story 2. I'd never name a child Chad. I had one in high school who made every day a headache, and the name still triggers eye rolls. Story 3. As a teacher, any form of Aiden, Caden, Jaden, Braden, and Olive. Story 4. I wanted the name Alexander because I was almost named Alexander. Unfortunately, my wife is a teacher, and there are hundreds of forbidden names, including Alexander. Story 5. Jeremiah. In my 10 years in the classroom, I have had 4 students. 1 less capable than a box of rocks, 2 semi-feral, and 1 the spawn of Satan. I have encountered many royal names for mostly the same reasons. King, royal, 2 princes, a princess, majesty, and queen. With the exception of majesty, they were all the P under the mattress, not the princess. If I were the sort of person to have children, I would spell their names correctly. Over the years I have seen Forever, Knowledge, and Missouri, and others that I have thankfully blanked out. Story 6. I worked with juvenile delinquents for over 20 years. I would never name a boy Travis. Story 7. The Guinness World Record holder for the world's biggest asshole is an uncle named Fred. Story 8. Scott bullied me throughout my school years. I still dislike him. Story 9. Hannah. If she were to answer this question, she would probably say my name. Story 10. I will walk away from anyone named Shane. Everyone I have met has been a total jerk. Story 11. Dirk, Derek, Dirk, and other variants. Everyone I know is a bully of some sort. Story 12. I was bullied by 2 different people named Michael, one at school and one at my workplace. Story 13. Every poor choice, bad partnership, and mistake has involved a Steve or Steven. Story 14. Kim. I've never met a Kim who wasn't a two-faced bitch. This includes my sister and may be primarily because of her. Story 15. Amanda. Everyone I have met with that name has psychological issues. Story 16. My nephew was named Corey. He died by suicide at 21 due to mental illness. My child is transgender, female to male. The name they chose, without any knowledge of family history, is Corey. Story 17. Nathaniel. Every single child I have met with that name has been a brat or a bully. This goes back to 1st grade, when a boy named Nathaniel was an asshole. Story 18. Jose was the most difficult coworker I had to deal with. Elias is a former coworker. Story 19. Braden bullied me into feeling nearly suicidal for years, from 3rd to 11th grade. Story 20. People named Chris, regardless of spelling, are 98% literal garbage. No thank you. Story 21. I love the name William. My piece of shit biological father is also named William. Goodbye. Story 22. Her name was Darlene, or any variation of that name. She sexually abused me as a child and chose me as her victim. I wish I had spoken up sooner so she could have been prosecuted. But she conveniently died right when I came forward. Well, at least she is in hell. Story 23. That sucks because if I gave my kid an anagram name, his first name would be Eli. Story 24. The first 10 people in my life named Brandon were all bad experiences. They were smelly, stupid, and mean. I am pretty sure most of them were left-handed. Story 25. Derek. He stole my lunch every day in middle school. Story 26. I was spat on by a kid named Daryl once, and since then I associate that name with people who spit. Story 27. Kate, Christine, Leanna, any ex-girlfriends from my past. It would just be weird. Story 28. Charlotte. It's a shame because it's such a pretty name too. Story 29. Christy. One was an alcoholic manipulator and the other was the worst boss I ever had. Story 30. Kathy. I have never met anyone named Kathy who is not the Earth's biggest bitch. Story 31. Kelly. I used to love the name, but since I was 18 years old, I have never met a nice person named Kelly. Story 32. Jeff is my ex-husband. I thank the Lord every day that we had a girl who was not named after him or anyone in his family. Story 33. Shelby was the worst roommate I ever had. I have also had many bad experiences with people named Jeff. Story 34. My daughter will never be named Rachel. The craziest girl I've ever met caused me lasting emotional damage and tarnished that name. Story 35. Kate reminds me of one of the nastiest and biggest bitches I have ever met. Every Kate since has been met with caution. Story 36. Jessica. I am 0 to 2 in relationships with them. Too much baggage. Story 37. Todd. I know there are some intelligent, thoughtful Todds in the world. I just haven't met them. Story 38. Tyler and Kellen are people in my grade who are complete assholes. They never grew out of the middle school phase of bullying and think it's funny to disrupt class. Ironically, when I came out as transgender, I changed my name to Kel because of a video game character I liked. I hate the name Kellen. Story 39. Pablo. I met a guy from Peru named Pablo in college who seemed to have many internalized issues. He believed he was white, thought Latin America was never colonized, and was generally a spiteful, hateful person. He was convinced of his own greatness and was insufferable. I have many stories and quotes from him, and it got worse when we studied abroad together in Spain. Story 40. Any proper noun. Cities, famous philosophers, precious stones. Nothing good will ever come from anyone named Sapphire, Sophocles, or Lincoln. Story 41. I wanted to name my daughter Ella so badly because it is such a pretty name and it was my great-grandmother's name. My great-aunt was also named Ella but was very mean to me when I was younger, so I chose a different name because of her. Now that my aunt has passed, I really regret not naming my daughter Ella. Story 42. In second grade, a bully named Billy used to pick on me. One day he swung his coat around and hit me in the mouth with his zipper. It hurt like hell. I never forgot it. Story 43. James is the name of 2 exes who caused me far too much trauma. I would never name my child James. Story 44. Dennis or Dylan. Almost everyone with that name I have ever met has been a prick or has wronged me. The first one wasn't his fault. We were in kindergarten and he was autistic. He did put a booger on me, though. Story 45. Jason was my ex-boyfriend. We both went off to college in 1989. He used the word forever and declared his undying love for me. Then I did not hear from him for a couple of months and received a letter, 1 paragraph if that, breaking up with me with no explanation. He never spoke to me after that, even though we worked at the same place for the next 2 summers. Story 46. Logan. I really like that name because I am a comic book nerd. 15 years ago, I did studio photography for a couple of months, and every annoying person I dealt with was named Logan. Story 47. Names such as honesty, serenity, chastity, and charity rarely reflect a person's character. In my experience in education, they are often the opposite. Story 48. Cecilia. I still love the song, though. I just would never name a child that because the one I knew was a grade A bitch. Story 49. I know several assholes named Jeff. It is sad because it is a nice name, but the people associated with it are not nice. Story 50. Andrew. Not a bad experience per se, but there were 10 Andrews in my class from kindergarten through high school. I feel like I've reached the upper limit of Andrews. Story 51. Both men named Nathaniel whom I met had anger issues and were semi-feral. The first helped his brothers try to burn down the house. The second frequently commented on my chest when we were in 4th grade. Story 52. David, Joshua, Michael, and John were not much better. All the bullies had Bible names in the 1990s. Story 53. Araceli, Ronaldo, Jorge, Rocio, Sebastian, Emma, Jocelyn. Story 54. Every angel I have ever met has been anything but an angel. Story 55. Christine. That was the name I considered, but then I had a witch of a boss with that name. Story 56. My husband hates Noah. I do not know who he is, but we dislike him, so that name will never be used in our family. Story 57. Katie or Kim. Ironically, Katie is my birth name, and I have disliked it long before I realized. Story 58. Charlie. Every Charlie I have ever taught has been a nightmare. It is a shame because I love the name, Story 59. George, I hope that everyone who sees your dick starts laughing uncontrollably. Story 60. Brianna, also known as Bree, never met a nice one. They are always the most cunty women. Story 61. Ella, or any name shortened to Al, with the letter L not I, molested me throughout my childhood and into my mid-teens. I thought my best friend touching me while I slept was normal at sleepovers for a long time. Story 62. Charlotte. I love it, but not the girl it is attached to. Story 63. I knew 3 jerks named Kevin. One was an ex, one I worked with, and one I worked for. Story 64. Seth and Alex were boys who physically and emotionally bullied me. There was also a girl named Amber, but to be honest, the name is nice enough that I would be okay naming a sim Amber. I avoid the other names even for my sims, let alone for a permanent relationship such as a pet or relative. Story 65. Henry. I was a naturalist educator. For some reason, during the summer camp season, every Henry was a terror. Story 66. I know 4 people named Samir. 2 of them were okay. One is a criminal. The other is a strange person on Twitter whom I used to be friendly with, but one day suddenly became rude to me. Story 67. Marie and Kyle are names that might still be used for babies today. I haven't seen anyone named Donald in either town I have lived in, not even in the cemeteries. Any babies I hear named Donald have my condolences. Story 68. Darren. I have never met a person named Darren who did not have a criminal record, a drug habit, or who was a complete asshole. Story 69. I knew a kid named Damon, and I remember him doing something really gross in elementary school. I never met another Damon after that, I do not think. Story 70. James, Kevin, and Wayne. I am sorry if any of these are your names, except for the men who inspired my list. You all can go straight to hell. Have a nice day. Story 71. Rachel. Everyone I have known with that name is just weird. Second. Aiden, Caden, Jaden. Story 72. I knew a kid named David, and he hit me with a tennis racket in 6th grade. Fucking asshole. Story 73. Any of my exes. I do not hold bad feelings toward them. Most of my relationships ended because one of us had to move for school or for a new job. Story 74. Debbie was my first love, but the relationship became a horrific experience. Story 75. Even though I like the name Victoria or Vicky, I have never met a nice person with that name. Story 76. Hunter or Kevin. Not that I'd name a child those anyway, but both were people I knew who had committed heinous crimes. Story 77. Paul. Everyone I know with that name is a creep, and it makes me think of Paul, the credit man in the diamond store commercials. Story 78. Reed. A truly terrifying small child I taught about 10 years ago. Heidi and Lisa, mean girls from high school. George, Michael, Renee, Mickey, Gary, Joseph, Jody. I'm realizing I have a lot of trauma left to unpack as my list keeps growing. Story 79. I used to want to name my child James until I worked with someone named Jamie. Story 80. My mom thought Victoria was a beautiful name and had planned to use it before my brother and I were born. But then she worked with a woman she absolutely hated who was also named Victoria. Story 81. When my husband and I named our daughter, we had a surprisingly long list of names. Most were names shared with coworkers. At the top of our list were Andrew, an entitled asshole, and Charlotte, an idiot. Story 82. Jacob. Every Jacob I have known has been an asshole, including my ex-boyfriend. Story 83. Jeffrey was a patient when I was a young certified nursing assistant. Suffice to say, I could never consider that name. Story 84. Lucas is short and annoying, and he tried to steal my chips at lunch. Story 85. Probably Sophia. I even like the name, but every Sophia I think I have ever met has been drop-dead gorgeous but also as dumb as a brick. Story 86. This is the name of my ex-boyfriend who abandoned me when I needed his support most. I was being abused, and when I finally told him, he stopped talking to me. Story 87. 20-plus years teaching high school. James. Kylie. Any name ending in Aiden. Sam. Jade. If it is spelled with a Y, it is okay. I love my troublemakers, but in no way can I name my children after them. Story 88. I've met several people named Kelly and Stacy. Each one has been nasty, selfish, rude, and entitled. Story 89. I met two Grants and would welcome never meeting another. Story 90. To name a few, Jason, Martin, Eric, Roberto, Indy, and Dickie, they were bullies. Story 91. I would exclude most names because I once had a patient with that name. My patients are dogs and cats. Story 92. Brittany was responsible for the murder of a family member. Story 93. Anything that ends with Risa, Clarissa, Marissa, Larissa, Arissa, Teresa. I had flings with each and I regret all but one. Story 94. There is a name I find very adorable for a girl I love, but it is also the last name of my ex-boyfriend. So unfortunately I cannot use it. Story 95. Bonnie, the only Bonnie I have ever known, has hated me since I was 12. I have no clue why. The first thing she ever said to 12-year-old me was that I was a slut. I was still playing with Barbies. She could go eat a shoe. Story 96. It's not even my hatred. It's my mother's. She is now in her 70s. My entire life she has despised that name. When she was 18, one of her colleagues had a boyfriend, also named Derek, who regularly assaulted that colleague. He also had a reputation for sexual violence. This was in the late 1960s. He gave her the heebie-jeebies whenever he came to the office, and she made a point never to be alone with him. Ever since, she has associated the name Derek with him, and we all inherited a certain disdain for the name as we were growing up. No offense to the many Dereks who are not violent. You are unfairly lumped in with that one. Story 97. Kyle and I went to school together, and we hated each other intensely. It was nothing but sniping for 6 years. Story 98. Lori, Denise, or Terry, laughing out loud. Perfectly good names. I just have some unpleasant memories associated with them. Story 99. I have been an elementary school teacher for over 20 years. My list of names that fit this is probably 10 pages long. Story 100. For a boy, James. I have dated 2 different boys, and they both ended up being jackasses. For a girl, Jessica was my so-called friend who bullied me. Story 101. Angus. Every person I have met named Angus has been the biggest asshole I have encountered. A close second would be Brendan. Story 102. Letitia was a common name. I knew 4 girls with that name when I was at school. They sought attention and only talked about themselves or teased other students in class. Maria Clara was similar. She told so many lies about girls she did not like, including me, that she ended up with no friends. Story 103. Ella or Bella. Possibly the 2 worst people I have ever gone to school with. I am not going to go into detail, but they were both pick-me people who always played the innocent card while blatantly insulting others. Story 104. Carly was a name we otherwise liked for our daughter, except that 10 years ago my ex cheated on me with a coworker named Carly, and she was awful. They can have each other, but the name was ruined for us. We ultimately chose a different name. Story 105. Catherine said we never had a relationship in high school. In reality, she did not want to accept responsibility for cheating on me with a man who ended up treating her like garbage. She did not deserve to date that narcissist, and I did not deserve to be dismissed so flippantly. Story 106. Anthony. I have not known an Anthony who was not a massive piece of shit. Not a single one. I have had so many negative experiences with men and children named Anthony that I am convinced the name is cursed. Sorry to every decent person named Anthony. I am sure there are decent, intelligent people named Anthony. I have just never met one. Story 107. Gray is likely to have only superficial friendships. Story 108. Oswaldo, a psychotic little fucker, was my kindergarten classmate. Story 109. One of my great-granduncles was supposed to be named Nils, as was the tradition, but my great-great-grandparents shared a room with a man by that name who was so unpleasant that they named their son Nehemias instead. Story 110. Alex, someone I thought was a close friend, slept with my partner. Story 111. I lost a girl to a guy named Seth. I would not have minded Kyle, Brock, Carter, Mason, Logan, or Alexander, but a fucking Seth. I had trouble showing my face in public after that. Story 112. His name was Gable Price. I was younger than him. He made me walk home from school in 3rd and 4th grade. He treated me like the bully on the Brady Bunch treated Cindy. Story 113. Princess Pussyfart or Ding Dong Dicky. Why did my 3rd grade teacher, Mrs. Tynes, may God continue to torment her with whatever put her in that wheelchair? She was cursed in life and is now in hell, call the intellectually challenged student who was also Mexican-American Slowpoke Rodriguez. She even mocked his mother when she called to ask her to stop. The 1980s. Or, as the 1990s would say, not. Story 114. Christine. I know Stephen King chose that name for a reason. Story 115. I had a friend whose father was named Barry, and he always picked on me. Story 116. Both my sister and brother-in-law are teachers. It took them forever to come up with names for their kids. Story 117. We decided against Charles because my partner's best friend with that name molested someone he knew. A friend's sister, if I remember correctly. I love the name Charlie, but I understand where my partner is coming from. Story 118. I was going to be named Richard, but my mother knew a Richard who was an asshole, so my parents named me something else. Story 119. Shania or Caitlin. These two relentlessly bullied me through middle school and high school. Story 120. Nathaniel, also known as Nate, was an awful, abusive roommate who made life miserable for everyone in the house. Story 121. No offense intended to anyone named Kevin, but almost everyone I have met with that name has been an asshole with the intelligence quotient of a brick. Story 122. Heather, Michelle, Katie, Marissa, Alexandria, Chelsea, Laura, Juliana, Brandon or Brandon, Cody, Emily, Christina, Elizabeth, Samantha, Robert, Mercedes. Story 123. I have only ever met one other person with my name whom I liked. Their name was spelled differently, so maybe it does not even count. Story 124. Jamie. This makes me really sad because it is one of my favorite names. Story 125. These are more traditional names, but to me, Heathers tend to be bitches and Robs are usually assholes. Story 126. I can't stand anyone named Renee, Renee, or Renee. Story 127. Pretty much any name I have encountered in high school. It does not even matter if I like the person. I do not want any correlations. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.